Alright, welcome everyone. This is the first video that I'm doing in the Dobyns Sierra casting rod series. Basically what this video is going to be going over is kind of my initial impressions, kind of some of the build qualities of the rod, and also the taper. That's kind of what I got set up here. I'm going to have the rod set up and then test the taper at different powers. At least for me, that's going to really kind of make my decision. I'm not saying it's going to make you buy the rod, but it's going to at least give you a good decision tool. Like for me, I was kind of worried about the rod with it being a solid tip, but I'll go into that when I go over here. I will start out by saying that I did get this rod from Bait Finesse Empire. They're an upcoming. They're more focused on like your enthusiast level, like finesse tackle. It's not just for bait finesse. Like the same lures you can throw with the spinning reel too. But basically what they're going to be doing is kind of focusing on like that mid-level to enthusiast level ultralight gear, which is kind of hard to find in the U.S. A lot of times ultralight gear is just considered being cheap. But there are a lot of good ultralight lures that you can catch bass with, but also like trout, panfish, all that kind of good stuff. So they did send me the rod, but before that I said, because he reached out to me on Instagram, I said, hey, I'll do it, but it's going to be unbiased. I'm just going to give my honest feedback opinion on it. And he agreed, so that's where that stands right now. So yes, I did get the rod for free, but it's unbiased. It's just like my G Loomis Conquest video I did, any other real reviews. Completely unbiased, my own thoughts on it, and kind of how you could use this as a tool to catch fish. So outside of that, I'm gonna go over some specs on it real quick. It's 1/16 to 5/16 of an ounce. That's 1.5 to 8 grams, which is really good to have that in grams, because once you like a 16th ounce shaky head to me can be completely different than what you think of it as. I could have a 16th ounce head. Let's say if it's a 32nd ounce head with the worm, and let's say if it weighs a total of a 16th ounce, you could think it's a 16th ounce head with a 4 or 5 inch Senko on there. That thing could weigh up like a little bit more than a quarter ounce. So the metric system, I feel, makes a lot more sense especially when you get into finesse tackle. But outside of that, that's a good feature I've seen like right off the bat. Something else too, like physically I've seen, is that handle. I'll try to stand a little bit closer so you can see it. It's a shorter handle. It's not just like they took they just didn't take their like a medium powered rod and just put a light powered blank and call it good. They actually redesigned it. I feel, because I don't see any other handles like this in their lineups. Is that they shorten it up, and what that does, you think that would throw the balance of the rod off, right? Because like, oh, say if it's a medium heavy powered, like 7-foot medium heavy rod, handle this small, you can be like, oh, that thing's tip heavy and all that kind of stuff. But given that the blank's lighter, you can actually like balance wise get away with a shorter handle. So I'll show the balance. Yeah, that's right on the reel nut right there. And this is a Daiwa Alpha SV. It's not a super light reel. It's also not super heavy. It's kind of like right in the middle of like what a lot of today's bait casters are, and that's perfect balance. So that balance plus the lightweight, you're actually getting a lot of response from your rod versus using a heavier rod, because not only is that balance right here, it's also a lighter blank, so it's going to take a lot less force to be able to get it to tip, which kind of works both ways. If you're working a shaky head, it's a lot less stress on your wrist and you can focus on the bites. But also when you do get bites, that fish is going to be pulling, so it's almost like a teeter-totter. Like you pull up like this way, it's easier, and also when that fish pulls, so you're going to be able to see those bites and feel those bites a little bit better. The hook keeper being on top, that's another thing that I didn't really notice until I actually had the rod in hand and I put this snap on there. So the hook keeper being on top, I usually put mine on the bottom when I build rods. But with that being on top, and this is, I should have used braid for this. So this is the main line, and this is the line coming from the tip. It fits right underneath the gearbox really good. It goes all the way under and then right there. So when you're putting your rod into your rod locker, or you're putting it, say, into a rod sleeve, it's a lot cleaner and your line's not kind of flopping all over the place. But outside of that, I'm going to jump right into getting into the bend of the rod, and also kind of talk about some uses that I'm going to be doing with it. Alright, so this is as close to 45 degrees I'm going to get it. I have it weighted, the rod weighted down there, so the butt's not going to move. It's just going to be through the tip. I chose to do a 45-degree angle because if you're working like a shaky head or something like that, your rod's basically going to be up at that 45-degree angle. and then your line is usually out, you know, extended past the 45-degree angle. So this is going to give you a good representation as to what it's going to look like at different forces in a real-world fishing environment. So I got the tip here. So one thing I will point out, the solid tip, it's marketed to have a solid tip, which it does, like a solid carbon tip. What that does, it's a little bit more durable, but also it bends a little bit easier than your tubular graphite in most rods. Which most of this rod is tubular graphite, just like most of your rods right there at home. So jumping into it, right here, this is where the solid carbon starts. This is where the tip of the rod is, just for reference point, this orange. So that solid tip, when you're jumping into it, it moves fairly easy. I know I've used some solid tips from some other rods, and for me, a lot of times those solid tips are super, super light, and then it hits a fairly stiff backbone, so it just looks like this with a little tiny bit of bend. It's really good for drop shotting, but outside of that, they're really awkward to cast, and they're more of a one-trick pony. They don't get a good versatility out of it. So I'll just bend a little bit more down. Actually, this is that transition area right here, just to let you know. So when I'm going down, it looks slightly flat. And what I mean by that is, you see how the taper flattens out a little bit. It doesn't look alarming. It doesn't look like it's really going to throw off casting very much. And kind of bending down. So I'm going to consider, this is like the tip area. I'd say to like maybe a couple guides down into the tubular area. Then you get a good midsection here. It actually flexes pretty good through there. I thought it was going to be a lot stiffer than that. Again, I'm pulling at like a 45-degree angle. And then once you get about here, I'll consider that kind of the backbone. It does get pretty stiff, and I have to apply a substantial amount of force on here. I don't want to really apply much more force than this because I don't want to break a rod before I even get to use it. And this will be video proof to Dobyns that definitely outside of the scope of the warranty. Which this rod does have a lifetime warranty with I think there's a $60 replacement on it. So it's actually really not that bad for a $180 rod, lifetime warranty. Just in case you do end up say the tip does have breakage issues, hopefully they'll go back to the drawing board and redesign it. But I'll tell you that's what the warranty is. I'm hoping not to use it. And this is my first Dobyns rod, so I can't speak personally on how that warranty process works. If you've used Dobyns rods before, comment down below how your warranty process has been. So going down, this initial flex, me personally, I don't think that I would use this for crappie. I know it does say that on the Dobyns website, but this is kind of a stiff rod for crappie. I mean, especially with the really thin mouths that they have. And so when you set the hook, and if they get next to the boat and thrashing, you're probably going to rip a lot of jigs out crappie fishing with this. Now this is just my in-house testing though. Bluegill, you could definitely do it. I prefer a lighter powered rod for bluegill, but if you're down south and catching 10 to 12 inch bluegill somewhat regularly, and you're doing it around brush piles or weeds, yeah, I definitely say you could use this rod. I wouldn't use it with braid doing that because it won't be enough give. But if you got mono or fluorocarbon, you can definitely get into some good gills with this rod. Another use too, obviously outside the finesse bass fishing I was talking about, I'd say like those lake dwelling trout. Not going to say lake trout because this rod would not stand up to lake trout up where I live, but like your rainbow trout, brown trout, and splake that live in lakes, that would actually work pretty good with this too. Again, I wouldn't use braid because it's not going to be enough give, but something I'm going to add here is that if I'm fishing, I'm just going to go over different lures. So if I'm fishing like a shaky head or something, I'm going to get that visual, like this is pretty light right here. I'm going to get that visual like, okay, I can see it's hitting my lure. And you're also going to be able to feel that too. So you're going to see that, and then when you go through, this will be more so on your hook set. That's enough. Think you got thin wired hooks. So it doesn't take a lot of force to drive that hook home like you would like a big bass flipping jig or something. So you're going to be able to set the hook, and then you can still, getting down more into it, you're going to be able to steer that fish away from docks or like a single stump. I wouldn't cast this in the back of like a stump field. Especially if you live down south where you can hook up with a 5-pound bass at any time. But for me, my big bass are usually smallmouth up where I live and a little bit more open water. So this rod would be just fine throwing tubes, hair jigs, all that kind of good stuff. But so the backbone, I'm not worried about it, especially with walleye too. I'd throw like 1/8 ounce heads with a, I don't know, maybe like a 2 to 3 inch, maybe even a 4-inch grub. And this rod would handle it just fine. I know my reels can all handle it, so when I do get out and test that kind of stuff, this looks like to me a really good shore fishing. Like, so a lot of times when you're walleye fishing, you can kind of fish on the heavier side, or you can fish on the lighter side. And you really get, you keep bouncing back and forth between spinning casting, spinning casting. So for this rod, for a one and done, you're gonna go out, you're gonna go walleye fishing. At least for me, just from how this taper looks so far, it actually worked really good. I do some walleye fishing from shore. So bringing one rod with me is gonna be absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I bet you can even cast live bait rigs with this rod. All right, moving on to crankbaits, something else I could talk about too. So when you're rocking that crankbait and it's going, you know, and your tips chattering, like you're hitting bottom, you got that small like 1/4 ounce crankbait or whatever, and then that fish hooks up. It still has some give through here. So what that's gonna do is that, or like a small chatterbait, or even like a small little swim bait, that fish can come up and suck it in. So when that fish sucks it in, your rod actually, I mean, your line stretches, and it picks up some of the slack. But your rod actually gives a little bit. So when it does that, it allows the fish to get a deeper hook set, not like down its throat, but into like the meaty part of its mouth. Versus if your rod tip was just really stiff, or you're using a stiffer rod, and you go to use those types of baits, what happens is they go to suck it in, and it doesn't really move as much. So they kind of just like grab it right with the skin of the lip, and that's how a lot of times you can lose fish. So like having a rod that has like a kind of like a multi-stage taper, I feel actually helps a lot. So you can still get feedback from the lure with your tip like this, and then when they suck it in, comes in, and then let's say they surge, you got more backbone there to still be. There's a backbone, but it still has give to it. So if they do surge, you're still cushioning that. So even if you do get like a less than desirable hook set into their mouth, like the fish's mouth, you're still gonna be able to cushion enough so it doesn't just rip that hook out of its mouth. Outside of that, let's see. I'm gonna see how this tip is. I'm gonna hold it. I mean, it's a really responsive tip. It's not like some sloppy fiberglass tip that a lot of times if you do ice fishing, you get some rods that have a really fast tip to it, and it's fiberglass, and it's really sloppy. It's dead feeling. It kind of absorbs the vibrations and stuff. So I personally feel that this rod so far actually could be a pretty sweet rod. It kind of so far has changed my expectations. I know at first I just thought it was gonna be a solid tip rod with a lot of backbone, but it actually has a pretty good backbone. Like I said, the tip's pretty soft, but not overly soft where you're gonna hit. Because what I'm talking about it being awkward casting is sometimes that tip, especially the solid, they bend, and then when you load it up, the rest of the rod bends, and it's kind of like a weird like boom boom like casting, really weird. It's not like a fluid casting motion. With this, I do see a very slight soft spot, like a flat spot, but it still bends all together. So I'm not really too worried about it. Like I get into my casting motion right here, that rod's still bending, and you're getting a lot of help still from the midsection of the rod casting. So I'm not going to be too concerned with the casting on it. Kind of overall that taper seems pretty nice. I don't know if there's other fish that you fish, even redfish. If you fish for redfish, I know a lot of times they like to use finesse casting gear. So even if you fish redfish, I've never fished for them, but this rod seems like it'd be good for throwing those weightless fluke style baits and stuff like that. Or if there's other ocean fish that you just basically anywhere that you want to be able to cast those. I want to use a casting reel, but I can't because my rod doesn't load up, or like my reel backlashes. This is going to be a big help in those awkward situations like that. All right, so the overall impression, I think it's definitely worth trying for $180 so far. If you're still on the fence, just watch my other videos. I'll do some casting, and that should be at least good enough. I mean, I'll be able to see kind of the sensitivity. If this rod can cast those baits, like, well, it's not that awkward like 2-stage casting. I think it would definitely be a winner. Lifetime warranty, $180 retail price for a seemingly pretty quality rod. Like when I put it in my hand, I'm kind of feeling it. I was just like, oh, okay, this kind of. I was like, it actually seems like it might fish above its price point. It at least feels like that in hand. My future videos will be able to go over that. All right, don't forget to check out Bait Finesse Empire. I know that he started an Instagram account. His website's gonna be live in about mid-April, so follow him on there. You can kind of get a sneak peek as to what he's going to be carrying. I know for me, he asked me to give kind of feedback on different products as to like what he should carry, what he shouldn't carry. So I will be doing a unboxing on that, some kind of like some teaser stuff that what he's going to be carrying. It's not only my feedback, but it's your guys' feedback too. If there's certain things that you want to see, comment down below on either this video or like that unboxing video, and we're going to try to make this mainstream BFS thing happen in the U.S. It's going to take support from all the viewers like you, followers on Instagram, all that stuff. And what that's going to do is drive that competition. Like this Dobyns rod, they're kind of the first ones to jump out there, and then other companies can start jumping on it. And then what that does is gives us more products available in the U.S. or say if you're in Europe or wherever. It gives kind of like that global market more BFS options, and more competition usually leads to better products and lower prices. So that's kind of why I'm doing it. Hopefully you guys help support it too. So check them out on there. Also, you can comment down below, like I said, at any time, any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks.